Hello, and welcome to English 328 Online, Writing Style and Technology. This short video will walk you through the syllabus and some of the basic course requirements for this class. My name is Steve Krause. I'm a professor in the English department here at EMU. I've been here since 1998, and I've been teaching this class along with a bunch of other classes, of course, since then. And I've been teaching it online since about 2004, 2005 or so. I'm married to Annette Wanamaker, and I mention that because sometimes I've had students in the past who have had classes from both her and me at the same time. She teaches children's literature here at EMU, and we have one son named Will. If you're looking at the syllabus, and I hope that you are, either printout or the electronic version, I'm going to talk about some of the details in that document. I'll highlight a few things for you. The first thing is the contact information. The best way to get a hold of me by far is by email. If you leave me a voicemail in my office, I'm not likely to get it very quickly, but if you get an email, I will almost always respond to it within 24 hours. The exception of that probably being on the weekends. My office hours and appointment are listed there, but the best way for us to meet face-to-face or to talk on the phone, if you are actually taking the class from a fair distance away, is by setting up an appointment that we can do via email. The books for the class are widely available through places like Borders or Barnes & Noble, and on the website for EMU Online, I actually have a link to Amazon.com for the books. But in brief, they are Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud, Strunk and White's The Elements of Style, and I have 3 different versions of the book there, and basically any contemporary version that you can get will be fine. Don't get the version that's just William Strunk, but if you get, for example, the 4th edition or the 3rd edition, which is on either side, if you get the illustrated version, which came out recently, that'll be fine. And Joseph Williams' Style Toward Clarity and Grace. Notice that this book will be in the store as it'll be yellow actually, and it's going to be in the $10 to $15 range, something like that. And I mention this because there's a textbook version that is different from this and that will cost you a lot more money, so make sure that you don't get that. There's also going to be a number of readings that are available only through eReserves or through the class website or EMU Online. Now, before we get to the points and stuff like that about the class, I got to re-emphasize the online responsibility component. You've all already received from me an email about this, and hopefully you've thought carefully about this, but just to repeat, you've got to be able to work comfortably with the computer technology that facilitates the class before the class begins. If you're someone who's taking the class because, it just seemed to fit into your schedule or whatever, and you're thinking, well, how hard could this computer stuff be? I don't really like computers, but, it'll work out. You might really want to rethink that and take a class when it's being offered on campus. Also, think about this in terms of your schedule, because the online class is going to take as much, if not more, time to complete the work in than a face-to-face version of the class would be. So in other words, if you were thinking, well, by taking a class online, I can take that many more classes and I can overload myself and it'll be easy and things like that, that's a bad idea too. Under no circumstances do I accept any excuses for things not getting done because of a computer failure or because you just got too busy doing other things. So think about that before we go too far. Now, having said that, let's talk a little bit about the syllabus. The class as a whole is worth 1,000 points. Participation is worth 200 points. This includes the discussion sorts of things on EMU Online, the optional face-to-face meetings, which hopefully you'll get a chance to come to, group work, peer review, that kind of thing. A big part of succeeding in the class for participation is learning about different technologies that we'll be studying this semester. And a little bit about, in terms of grading participation, the way that I do that is that at the middle of the term, I'll ask you to each send me an email telling me what you think you ought to be receiving for a participation grade. I will consider that along with my observations, and we'll have a little discussion dialogue about that. The blog posts, and we'll talk about the difference between the posts and the pages in a bit, are worth 150 points for the term. These are assigned posts that you will have that I assign throughout the course. They're usually short entries onto the blogs, onto the blog that connect to the readings and activities of the class. We'll be using a software called WordPress.com to to support these blogs. It's really easy to use and it's quite free. I think the most important thing about doing these blog posts is to do them and do them in a timely fashion. They don't have to be perfect pieces of writing, but if you don't do them, then you're going to lose points. It's worth 75 points for each half of the term for the blogs. So I will look at the first half. For the first half, I'll look at your blog post and I'll make a grade. And for the second half, I'll look at the blog post and make a grade and go. And it's each worth 75 points. We'll also use the blogs as a place to publish the portfolio of writing projects, which I'll get to, well, now actually. This is the bulk of the class. There are 4 major projects for the class that are worth a total of 600 points. There's going to be a lot more details about this, but just in brief, the first one is about a technology invention exercise. The second one is a project about style. The third one is a visual rhetoric/comic project. And the last one is a collaborative movie project, and where you will work with small groups to make a short movie, and then you will individually write an essay. Now, the essays that you write for all these projects are going to be published as pages on WordPress.com. Now, this is going to make more sense once we actually get into the WordPress.com part of it. But the point is that you'll be publishing these things electronically in that space, and I'll be reading them there and commenting some there, and then also posting grades on EMU Online. The essay parts of these projects, and you'll see once we get into it that all these projects involve some component that is an essay and some component that's not an essay. But the essay part of these projects all have to be in MLA style, and my assumption is that by the time you get to a 300 level writing class, you know what that means. I don't accept projects late. If you're late for more than 72 hours, I begin to deduct. If you're late, I deduct a letter grade every 72 hours. The one exception to that is, as I explained in the syllabus, is that if you tell me before a project is due that you need an extension on deadline, I almost always will grant it. However, if you don't do that, and if you just hand it in late, I will start deducting a letter grade from your project. A big part of the class for me in terms of these writing projects is a revision. And again, I discuss this quite a bit in the syllabus, and we'll talk more about this as the term goes on. But in brief, you can revise any or even all of the 4 major writing projects. You can't revise the blogs, you can't revise participation, but you can revise this. There's only a few conditions. The first one is that you have to have some sort of plan for what it is you're going to do to revise it. You can't just say, well, I'm going to do what you told me to do. You need to have something a little more thought up about that. The second condition is that we have to discuss this in person, or if you can't come to campus to meet with me, we have to discuss this over the phone. And the last issue here is you're going to want to think about revising things wisely. You want to revise to improve your grade and to improve your writing, but you don't want to revise just for the sake of revising, if that makes sense. The final is worth 50 points. As I say here, it's not so much a test as it is a reflection on the class. This is part of the NCATE live text, the NCATE process. So for those of you who are taking this class who are hoping to be secondary school teachers, you'll have to submit this to live text. And the final is right there on EMU Online right now. So if you want to, you could even go and review it yourself. In order to pass the course, you must complete all of the major writing projects and the final, regardless of your grades for any of the other components of the course and regardless of your grades with the missing components. In other words, if you don't hand one in one of the major writing projects, you will fail. Let's talk just briefly about the calendar. Generally speaking, you'll see that it says begin by Monday and complete by Wednesday, and begin by Wednesday and complete by Friday. That's exactly what that means. So, for example, you can't wait until Friday to do all the work for the class. That won't work. The end of the day is midnight, although, if everybody waits until midnight to hand stuff in, then we may have some other kinds of problems in terms of how the conversation will take place. This isn't fixed in stone, but this is pretty much the way it's going to be. Note specifically the due dates for projects, and note also the face-to-face meeting gatherings, because those will be a fun component of the class, I hope. And last but not least, don't forget that that end of time, which will be the very end of the semester. We'll talk more about that once we get there. Okay, that's it. Welcome to class, and let's get to work.